Good morning, Africa. Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, Akwa Ibom State. It's a beautiful Monday morning. A great day to be alive and a good day to rise and shine with you wherever you are. Of course, this is Rise and Shine coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. My name is Uyai Anekan. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
And I am Francis Oyemaidet. Glad to have you join us this new week. I hope you had an interesting weekend and, of course, you're well refreshed and ready to kickstart the rest of the week.
Of course, the rest of the week, like I always like to put it, the business week is upon us. Fresh days to make more money, make more impact, provide more solution to problems in the society. Of course, that's why we are here to do the things that we do. But of course, this is Rise and Shine. This is Spectrum Television. We need to remind you to follow us across all social media platforms, all of which you can find at spectrum.ng. And of course, like we like to say, it's Monday morning. Let's talk Nigeria. What's happening on your end? I know conversations around Niger coup has become really strong. Different indices are playing in. The fact that we see that the coupist leader has said, ECOWAS and the rest of the world should give them 3 years, that in 3 years they would hand over power back to democratically elected governance, and also the fact that we see news of planes, war planes from Russia arriving in Niger. And the big question is, okay, where exactly is this issue escalating to? 3 years is the request that, they gave to ECOWAS. And of course, ECOWAS has rebounded on that particular request already.
Well, I think you said it about last week. I think midweek last week, you made it clear. And it's just what is happening. Once the military guys take over power, it's always a very challenging situation to restore power to democracy, and it's going to take time. But 3 years for people who said their interest in taking over power was not to do anything outside of helping the ordinary citizens. I always would ask the question, and as military personnel, they know that once there is an all-out, all-scale war between the forces of ECOWAS and that of the military junta, there is no how you're going to put it. There are going to be casualties on the part of the Nigerians who are going to be the ones to suffer the most. The military personnel, they are ready to die. I mean, they were trained to die, literally. But what happens to the common Nigerians? What happened to the common man on the streets of Niger Republic who is not trained to die, who is not ready for what is coming or what might be coming? And like we always say, it is very important that, the junta look into things that can actually be attainable as opposed to just ruling out itself. I know that a lot of military experts or security analysts would say probably this is because ECOWAS took the first wrong step of, using force and aggression and threatening war. And that is one of the reasons why the military junta is still standing its ground. But then one would also expect that, we'll get to find a common ground between the military junta and the ECOWAS. But 3 years is way too much. That's literally saying, okay, you're leaving out the remaining days of President Bazoum, and then the new administration will start afresh. And they went further to call for political parties to submit their manifesto or agenda for governance in the next 30 days. That is in preparation for 3 years from now. If you look at the indices, it's just not something that will go well for the Niger Republic. But then, when you look at the might behind the junta, Russia, the Wagner mercenaries, and what they represent, it still goes along to ask certain questions. Are Nigerians, the junta, are they actually doing this in the interest of the Niger people, or they are doing it for some other person's interest and their personal interest? Because if they were doing it for the interest of the Nigerians, then we wouldn't be seeing external forces. If you're kicking against the Western superpowers, and yet you're going to Russia, you're having the backings of Russia, what message are you putting forth? It definitely means you're still, one way or the other, a slave to some other powers. Whereas if it was about the liberation, the freedom, good governance of the people, then we would have seen a different scenario playing out. And I think the military junta in Niger are not, are very short-sighted. they have forgotten in a hurry what happened in Russia itself when, you know, the leadership of the Wagner mercenary, you know, carried out a mutiny against its own government. So if you're thinking this group of guys, you know, would just literally come in and submit to you without having something to gain, it is completely out of the table. And let me not even try to be epic this morning, but you know, sometimes when you watch action movies or military movies, you get to find out that governments in Africa bring in mercenaries to help them, you know, stay in power, military juntas. But you oftentimes will find out that the military, you know, mercenaries they bring in will come overthrow them and then take over the country. So at that instance, who brought in the foreigners? It is you who opened the doors for the foreigners to come and further enslave your people. So I think the military junta needs to have a rethink. ECOWAS have said they're not going to take it. Of course, I didn't expect them to take it. But then I believe that if the military junta has a sense and the interest of the Nigerians, of course, ECOWAS also having that interest, we might be able to find a common ground. Many security experts have said 1 year is okay for all of the things that the junta needs to put in place for, you know, transition of power to be done. But asking for 3 years, that is way out of.
When you absolutely stretch to 3 years, it brings a little bit of greed into the whole picture. Because what do you want to do for 3 whole years that the country needs to wait, the whole, you know, the rest of the ECOWAS bloc needs to align to the fact that you want to be in power for 3 years. And I think one of the other big questions that has been raised on the premise of this coup in Niger is, by the time that you see that 22 civilian ministers, you know, were appointed by the junta leadership, now one is asking, does it now look like, oh, they intend to have a healthy collaboration with the civil, you know, civilians in the nation in the running of their affairs? To what extent will this bring successes? Remember that Alizien, who is, you know, one of the topmost ministers in Niger at this time, making moves, speaking here and there on behalf of the coup, you know, leaders and the rest of that. It now looks like, at the very first instance, it looks like the whole idea is represented well, but 3 years is a long time. And then when we come down to talking about the fact that, you know, we are seeing warplanes arrive from even Mali, Burkina Faso, but the biggest news was the fact that, you know, Russian airlines were seen landing in Niamey, the capital of Niger. Then the questions just keep rolling. What are these planes doing there at this time? Remember that 2 weeks into the coup in Niger, their airspaces, you know, were shut down just to be able to curtail activity, and you know, their response was that it was in reaction to the threat by ECOWAS. But now, like you had earlier pointed out, they are working in alliances with certain other nations. Burkina Faso, Mali, yes, they had pledged their support to their sister nation. But when you see the presence of Russia right now, the name Russia does not represent peace in any part of the world. So when you see an African nation standing toe to toe with, you know, Russia and having their presence in their country, what does this stand to mean? And, you know, upon the fact that ECOWAS has said we cannot agree 3 years, we are now seeing, you know, Russian presence in the country. What is this going to mean? Are we, you know, are there speculations that this might begin to skyrocket into other things in the next coming days? And I think that also is an attempt by the coup's leaders to solidify, you know, their claims as the fact that they are ready, you know, to oppose any kinds of intrusion by the ECOWAS bloc and or any other West African nations that, you know, they are not even standing together with at this time. But this is a really serious problem. We need to also look at the humanitarian angle, you know, to this particular issue, how it is beginning to rub off not just on, you know, cities, not just on Nigerians, but other Africans. Food, you know, imports and exports within these African corridors are already shutting down, and that's going to be a major issue. But one would think, why is dialogue not working out? At this point where these Russian planes have landed in, you know, Niamey, what is the ECOWAS going to do? Remember that the ECOWAS has said they are not standing down their plan to invade militarily if negotiations do not yield any kind of results.
Well, we saw last week the security chiefs across the ECOWAS country meeting in Ghana and coming to some resolution, but We never anticipated that it might come this fast. There were lots of hopes towards the meeting between the ECOWAS delegation and that of the military junta in Niger. Well, unfortunately, the outcome is on the negative side. I'll still say this: as far as the junta in Niger is concerned, if the junta are actually looking out for the interests of the Niger people, then war should be ruled out completely. However, they're going to do it, because you're talking about infrastructures being destroyed, you're talking about lives being wasted, you're talking about sanctions being placed that will further drive the economy downward. Now, to which extent, to whose benefit, to whose disadvantage are all these things going to happen? The military junta might probably put in place things to make sure that they and their supporters are on top of the situation. But what about the common people on the streets of Niger? Will they also have everything working out for them as a result of this? So one way or the other, war is never the option. But I know that as far as the military junta is concerned and the ECOWAS is concerned, unless there is a common ground, we just might be walking towards another military breakout in Niger, which of course, God help us, we don't get to that point.
Of course, well, that's it. I'm sure that more explanations are going to be given as to why those planes landed in Niamey. Excuses might be made in the first round, but in the long run, everyone is going to see what exactly is happening there. But then let's move to our first story this morning. Serious things happening in the country. Monday morning, over the weekend, several issues happened, and we are still looking into how the whole Tinubu-led administration is going to be stabilized. I think we've gone down to almost 100 days in office for this new leadership across the country. But this is a big one again by the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project. They moved asking President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to stop ministers who are serving in his cabinet at this time, who are former governors, for their pensions to be stopped. Now, that every ex-governor, every ex-deputy governor in this country earns pensions. So when they are finished serving their term as governors and deputy governors and then move on to be ministers, Serap is urging the federal government and the president to stop former governors from collecting this pension. So it's more like multiple pensions you're receiving for being a former governor, and then you're receiving for being a minister as well. Who is checking these things? For instance, now let's use the Senate president as an example. Former governor of Akwa Ibom State, 8 years, and then he was also a minister in the Buhari-led administration. Does it mean that he's collecting pensions as former governor of Akwa Ibom State, collecting pensions as a minister under the dispensation of the Buhari-led administration, and now is sitting as the Senate President of the Federal Republic? So we see, Sarah urging President Bola Tinubu to publicly instruct the former governors who are now serving as ministers in his administration to stop collecting life pensions, exotic cars, and other allowances from their states while they serve as ministers. We also see here Sarah urged him to instruct the former governors to immediately return any pension and allowances that they may have collected since leaving office to the public treasury. Well, someone might be saying that that is a hike that you're asking for. Maybe we will not toe the route and return everything that you so far collected. But if we say going forward, those multiple windows of pension are going to be withdrawn from serving ministers, and people who have held, multiple portfolios in governance, we are going to decide which stream of pensions you can still continue to receive. Of course, these pensions run into millions of naira every year at the expense of state government and also the federal government for that matter. So if we stem this, we'll be handling a lot. Of course, some governors have been picketed who are currently serving as ministers in the present administration. We see the like of Badaru Abubakar, Nyesom Wike, Bello Matawali, Adegboyega Oyetola, and David Umahi, Simon Lalong, and Atiku Bagudu, Ibrahim Gaidam, just to mention a few people who are themselves former governors of state who are currently serving as ministers in this cabinet and will be receiving multiple incomes from the same government at the same time.
Well, it's definitely a call taken in the right direction. Remember, we've been talking about cutting cost of governance. We've been talking about multiple expenditures. Certainly, this call is not going to be an easy one, because we know that the president himself is also a former governor of Lagos State, and is also inside that list of people who are still collecting pension at double side. So is a test of integrity, is a test of transparency, a test of accountability, a test of what I would call at this point the true sacrifice that the president has been asking for Nigerians. Can President Ahmed Bola Tinubu actually sacrifice the pensions he's been getting from Lagos State? I recall the last, I think 3 or 4 months back, there was a whole lot of issues about how much he takes home as a former governor of Lagos State. So will the president be able to let that go? That's a big question we cannot answer. Will the other governors who are now going to serve as ministers also let it go? That's still a question. But in the event that these people actually have the interests of the common people at heart, they should be able to let it go. Because if you look at all they've accrued over the years, I mean, it's particularly enough for anybody to exist or to live out his or her dreams for the next how many generations. But then, politicians seems to have a knack for not giving up whenever money is involved, whenever entitlement is involved. And if this is actually going to sell through beyond the Tinubu's administration, it's called for a legal instrument to actually say, from henceforth, we are putting a stop to former governors, former deputy governors, speakers of the House of Assembly, deputy speakers. You're talking about the principal officers at the National Assembly, also the presidency. There is a law putting an end to all of those. If we are going to pay maybe a one-time off pension, to help them settle in and then go back to doing business, which of course is one of the arguments that Nigerians have had. I mean, you're looking at, you've served the country, yes, you're being given a one-off payment, just like we have people in the civil service, being given, their gratuities, and then if you are able to use that wisely to invest in business and other ventures, you should be able to keep yourself and your family going for the rest of your days, rather than bothering the states, bothering the country with consistent payment, consistent amount of money, and especially when the country is consistently borrowing. So it's really a test on the part of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, a test on the part of the leadership of the Senate under Godswill Akpabio, a test on the part of the leadership of the House of Reps under the leadership of Tajuddin Abbas. All of these three, leaders need to rise up at this point and show Nigerians that they're also ready to sacrifice their part of the bargain to ensure that we have a better, a more functioning, Nigerian society for all of us to thrive.
Well, those are, really strong conversations this morning, and, strong issues happening in the country drawing our attention. It's the willingness to see our leaders also sacrifice to the extent that can help us stabilize as a nation. These sacrifices, are they things that only the leadership, the presidency is asking of Nigerians? Who is going to sacrifice for what makes Nigerians, to live pretty much a stable life? And the cost of governance is alarming in our nation, to say the least. And when we have these, replicated positions and these monies keep going down to the same families, I mean, it was the president who talked about the fact that there is now a concept such as elite of elite. So even in the bracket of the elite, there is another section that is high up there, and these people are still, earning and making more profit at the expense of the rest of the population. I mean, Nigeria belongs to all. Over 200 million people in this country. It doesn't belong to a clustered few of maybe 1,000 elites who, try to wait for everyone to come cap in hand to them to earn a living. we need to do better. And like we'd always say, Serap usually puts in a really good move against the federal government and certain policies in the country. But then again, after raising some of these concerns and moving to the court, do we have what it takes to be, to exert implementation? What will it take for us as a country to be able to change the narrative where we say, okay, we believe that ABC is contravening, nationhood? How can we address it? Because oftentimes we also see these civil society organizations profess some solutions. When they do we have what it takes? Bring, some technocrats, some leaders, and say, okay, this is actually true, let's do it. But the greed of politicking in our country is actually nosediving our economy. And we are meant to be a nation who ought to thrive way better than we currently do. But we are the bottlenecks in the system. Our politicians are the bottlenecks in the system. And this is further driving us aground. If we take out the lump sum that we take in cycling amongst these people, we'll be able to raise our refineries. We'll be able to get roads from the rural centers up to the urban centers, so that agricultural produce and other things that they produce, find market as soon as possible. Several issues, even insecurity, can be nipped in the bud, because if we take the monies that we are using to flag off certain flamboyant lifestyle for certain people, invest it into technological advanced equipment for the military, to a very large extent, some of the results we are hearing will be different at this time. But Nigerians will say that you can take a horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink.
Definitely, you can take a horse to the water, to the river, but you can't force it to drink. Now, let's come back. Today, just this morning, we hear that the federal government is prioritizing security as they move to swear in the new ministers. The question is, are we truly prioritizing the issue of security in Nigeria? I know that within the course of the weekend, northern governors expressed their concern over the increase in banditry attacks, the increase in insecurity within the region. But then, how committed are these governors themselves to putting an end to the insecurity currently threatening the peace and stability of their regions? How much efforts have they put in to ensure that people who have been declared themselves enemies of the people, enemies of the state, are able to be read out? We've heard different comments coming from the military, vowing to put an end to insurgents, to terrorists, and all of that. But what is the willpower of those in position of authority to actually carry out, beyond the press statement, beyond the vows and promises made to the Nigerian people? It goes past that. I would always say, yes, the press statements are beautiful, but what would be most acceptable, more meaningful to Nigerians, would be us getting to see past your press statement, see an action that shows that you're committed to actually living out the press statement. Now, if we had to follow security experts who have opined that Nigeria has what it takes to read out insurgents, what is the biggest problem? It still goes back to the question of leadership. It goes back to the question of directive, the political will, the military will on the parts of those who are saddled with the responsibilities to mind the system. Now, when we get to that point, all of the collaboration, it's all collaboration between the Anambra state government and the military, in the north, the southeast, collaboration with the Enugu state government and the military, collaborations in the north. All of these collaborations can only yield when there is a backing military will, military might, and of course, the political will and might on the part of the government. When these two come to a common ground of agreement and say, let's put an end to this, then it's definitely going to happen. And I know that the conversations that, the governors have been having in the past week particularly has been, bringing in traditional leaders, community leaders, religious leaders into a round table to have this conversation that if we are going to put an end to insecurity, we must work together. The military, the politicians, the traditional leaders, the youth leaders, all of these people must work together to weed out these criminal elements within the community. And that is possible. But then, if we have to go back to, what is it again? The whistleblower policy. The people, before the people, or for the people to be able to come out and issue revelations or give informations about this criminal element, whom they know their hideouts and where they're staying, there needs to be that 100% plus guarantee that when a person in a community comes out and points in the direction of the criminal element, somebody within the ranks and file of government, somebody within the ranks and files of the military or the armed forces is not going to go behind and reveal the identity of that person who actually offered that information. When we get to that point, then we are going to have that kind of collaboration, sharing of information that will allow the Nigerian armed forces to weed out, this criminal element. It's actually possible. But then, the question that all of these persons need to answer is, are we ready to be sincere to ourselves and to the cause of putting an end to insecurity?
Well, strong questions there that only our leaders can answer. The willpower must be there. But let's look at some really troubling reports from the Central Bank of Nigeria this morning. The economy is one thing that we've been grappling with literally since January. So it's more like, Nigerians will say in a particular parlance, this seems to be, the Buhari-led administration pro max. Because, under, the former president, Nigerians were already seeing their eyes. But now, the Tinubu-led administration since May 29 seems to have escalated every kind of experience that Nigerians were having prior to this time. Are there explanations that this will turn out for good in the nearest future once the policies are able to stabilize and Nigerians can, take out emotions from relating with all the policies and the moves of the Tinubu-led administration? Well, yes, they are. But the Central Bank of Nigeria highlighted a certain report that is bringing up a lot of reactions from Nigerians. We see the fact that Central Bank says it cost them about 74.84 billion naira to produce and roll out currencies, including the new naira notes in 2022. 74.84 billion naira is how much it cost us as a nation to print currencies that we all currently cannot find in the country. And of course, despite the scarcity of the naira that plagued the country in the latter months of 2022, the CBN spent 40.42% more than the 53.29 billion it spent in the preceding year to roll out currencies. Now, according to the Apex Bank recently released financial statements, they spent 29.65 billion on currency issue expenses for 2022, which is about 94.66% increase from what was spent in 2021. 2021 saw the CBN spend only 15.23 billion for currency expenses, and it has continued to grow. We stood at 74.84 billion as of 2022. Now, let's not forget the fact that the naira is plagued with all kinds of issues as we speak, and this is how much it is costing us to recycle our own currency in our country.
Well, it's actually one of the reasons why Nigerians are lashing out on the leadership of Ahmed Bola Tinubu as the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the DSS for the different charges brought against the embattled CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele, because Nigerians had expected that the charges would border on things like this. How much was spent to, expended to ensure the printing of the so-called redesigned new naira, and how much was, recovered, how much was printed as a result of that much that was spent. And then, of course, you're also talking about the corruption within the Apex Bank that has been said to be long-standing. But will we get to a point where Godwin Emefiele is held accountable for his actions? That's a big question that we need to really look at. All eyes on Nigerians rather will probably be on the presidency, on Godwin Emefiele, and to see how this is going to turn out. Because most Nigerians have asked and argued, you cannot bring Godwin Emefiele out to suffer for any crime or alleged crime he must have committed as the the governor of the Apex Bank, without bringing into consideration and also bringing in for the full wrath of the law to take its course, the leadership of the country as at then, which of course was on the shoulders of His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, then Muhammadu Buhari, because he was the one at the helms of affairs. He was the one giving the final order. The box of the decision stopped at his table. So for Godwin Emefiele to have gone against the outcry from the IMF and other monetary organizations within and outside Nigeria, the trade union organization, all of this advices, advisories, statements made, even the Minister of Finances at then, for Godwin Emefiele to have gone against all of those advices, all of those people, and still be able to print the redesigned Naira, it therefore means there was somebody who had the might power to say, you know what, go ahead, whatever happens, I'm on your back. So now that he's being, dragged in and out of the court for different charges, Nigerians want to see charges bordering on the expenses made for the redesign. Nigerians want to see charges bordering on, the redesigned Naira. How much has it done to the Nigerian economy? How much improvement have we seen, or how much loss has it brought to the country? So if there are improvements, which of course many have said there isn't, economists have argued there isn't. There has been no improvement as a result of the redesign Naira, but rather it has cost Nigerians a whole lot. Remember, trade stopped. A lot of businesses are shut down because of that redesigning of the Naira. We're not even talking about the number of lives that were lost or the mental drama that Nigerians were put through. For the first time in this country, we saw grown-up men, responsible men, stripping naked in banking halls because they could not access money to go take care of their families. We've seen pregnant women within the course of that period dying in the hospital because the government facilities themselves were not willing to receive transfer, even when they knew that the cash was not readily available. So it goes down to a lot of, a lot of charges that Nigerians are expecting. Well, many have said it's a great fresh start for the federal government. I mean, bringing in the allegation of illegal procurement or procedure or procurement fraud and other charges, 20 number, brought against Emefiele. But we'll still have to sit and see how this is going to turn out, because the federal government at this point, the DSS at this point, are not even willing to bring in the likes of the former president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to also, stand toe-to-toe with Godwin Emefiele. And if Godwin Emefiele's, lawyers are as strong as many legal experts would say, this case is just going to be like the embattled, IPOP leader. It's just going to be like a witch hunting session between the Ahmed Bola Tinubu's administration and Godwin Emefiele, which of course, the federal government is acting in contempt of court as we speak. How much of the breaking of the law will the federal government continue to break just to save its face?
There's a lot of questions, embedded in all of this, and how can we save face? But beyond saving face, we need to see how, the economy can be stabilized. 74.8 billion is a lot of money to have been spent. And the inflation keeps hitting every sector and everything we do in the country, because the numbers are rising from 15 point, how many billion spent in the previous year. You come all the way to 74. What are the indices that got involved? And then if you look back to that procurement allegation, some of these things, will also be highlighted, because we're also looking at the activity of the Nigerian Security Printing and Minting PLC in all of this. What is their part to play? How much did they gulp in printing the Naira? So they're saying it's not just, printing of these currencies. We're also looking at cost incurred for transporting the currencies around the country, and other indices involved. And this is how much it is costing us. Are there easier ways that we could have done this without taking on some of this cost? Maybe yes, experts will tell you that. But this is also a serious issue that we see here, because there's been moves for the Central Bank of Nigeria to publish their account statements in the last 7 years. But of course, you see the way the central bank has kicked against that. Now, two things are involved. Is that constitutionally right for the apex bank of the country to open information about its financial activities in the last 7 years, for public scrutiny or to public knowledge? That's a big question. Is that something that is permissible within the boundaries of the law as it binds the Central Bank of Nigeria? If this is done, Are Nigerians ready for the kinds of details that they're going to be seeing? Remember, in the under the Buhari-led administration, there were conversations of tons and tons of monies that the federal government had borrowed from the Central Bank of Nigeria. What are the procedures put on ground to pay back those monies? Now, in the name of borrowings from the federal government and other agencies, how much has been siphoned in all of this? So two things are involved. Will the law allow the CBN to, reel out its activities in the last 7 years? That is more like we want to probe what was done under the Buhari-led administration, Godwin Emefiele administration, with the CBN. That's a really big move.
Well, I'm not bothered like most Nigerians about the move by the CBN to release its account details, because oftentimes we see this move being kick-started, and sooner than it's being kick-started, it ends up somewhere in the corner of someone's office without it actually going to public space. So it's one thing for the leadership of the Apex Bank to rise up. Many are still saying this is a witch-hunting vendetta on the part of the leadership of this present administration against Godwin Emefiele. But let's look at it from another side. If it is actually permissible within the laws of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for the Apex Bank to publish its account details and all the financial details that has gone on for the past 7 years, will we actually see, within the course of the publication, things that weren't done right being investigated, being probed, and then those found culpable, facing the full wrath of the law? That's a big question again. Because it's one thing for you to publish the account details, it's another thing for you to, upon publishing the account details, be able to bring those persons who within the system, made blunders, persons who didn't follow due process, persons who for one reason or the other choose to jump the gun and do something that wasn't supposed to be. So it goes past just the account statements and all of that. Remember, we've not forgotten in Nigeria so soon what transpired when there was a forensic audit from the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs during the Senate President's tenure. We all saw the drama that happened at the National Assembly. It seems as at then that even the members of the National Assembly had no clue what was actually happening, or some of them had clues of what was happening, but some didn't have. I recall the scenario that brought in the trending video, Honorable Minister, of your mic and all of that, suffers in Nigerian space. So we need to be intentional, we need to be deliberate, we need to go past just press statements, moves to probe and attempt to probe, when for fact we are not really interested in making sure that the problems that are going to be uncovered within the course of this probing are going to be rectified, are going to be sorted out. Because if you probe and you're not able to hold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 persons accountable, the law is not taking its course on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 persons because of the anomalies or misdemeanor, found in those probing processes. Then you are putting the whole scenario out there just for the public to know that, they attempted and they didn't do anything. Don't also forget that as a result of this, we are going to have committees being set up. These committees being set up might also come with funding to allow them do their oversight functions, to allow them seats, to allow them do investigation and all of that. And it still goes down to the same conversation: extra spending for the government of the day. Can we get past that? It's possible. Should we probe? Yes, if the government of the day has the willpower to actually make sure that people who have found one thing, people who have broken the rules, go in for it.
Well, of course, we saw the fact that the Central Bank of Nigeria had released their consolidated financial statement for the last 7 years, and it made it the first time since 2015 that the Apex Bank made those books available to the public. But then experts, still found a loophole in that move. So, of course, these consolidated financial statements which were released were to cover the period of 2016 to 2022 financial period. Now, analysts say that move in itself was suspicious and required further probing. So it's more like, there are moves to cover more things in that particular release. Is that, economic statement that was meant to be released by the Central Bank of Nigeria. So we see that, economic experts are even saying the central bank needs to do better than the financial reports that have been released so far. So it takes us back to the conversation of transparency and accountability by public system and public office holders to Nigerians if we must move forward. But that said, the lump sum spent to redesign and recirculate the naira notes in the country as of 2022, looking at 74.8 billion naira. Of course, 74, yes, 0.8 billion naira. That's what it cost us in 2022. But of course, that's literally it. We take to our very last story for this segment, and we are seeing the fact that ministers designate is still all about the monies that our government is willing to spend on themselves. Ministers designate are to get 1.37 billion naira for accommodation, Francis.
Yeah, it's the entitlement. I mean, the ministerial appointment comes with entitlement. It comes with payment. It comes with housing allowances, accommodation, transport, and all of those allowances within the provisions of the law. I literally would not have any issues with that. But then it's still the same question. Are we really ready to put an end to the borrowing expenditure, the borrowing vendetta in Nigeria, the borrowing spree in Nigeria, when we see this amount of money being railed out? So you're looking at, these ministers going home with the different amount of money, 30%, 25%, literally everything that they do is being budgeted for within the provisions of, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, what they take home. And it's a big bother for Nigerians to sit and hear the amount of money that goes to these individuals sent to represent the people when it is not commensurate with the kind of jobs that they do. Remember, we're talking about persons who go to the National Assembly, and from the beginning of the National Assembly to the end of the plenary session, they have not said one thing. They have not stood up to sponsor one bill. They have not stood up to co-sponsor one bill. They have not done anything. They literally go there to sleep every day and then come back at the end of the day. But they are being paid on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis. Their entitlements are never withheld. So, in these contexts, the argument and the conversation borders around the government actually projecting laziness as against people who are hardworking. So if you're saying a politician who is a National Assembly member who goes to the National Assembly on a daily basis during plenary, sits down, sleeps through, and then at the end of the month, he's being paid or she's being paid. The same thing goes on for months, for years, and then at the end, the person goes. And then it's still given, the entitlement of, that comes with occupying the office. Meanwhile, we have millions of Nigerians who are working themselves out every other day, who are not able to meet or access that kind of wealth. So it's a sorry situation for the country. It's a sorry scenario playing out, not just for Nigeria, but something that is relevantly visible within the sub-region of Africa. And that is part of the conversations we are having at this point. Governance, people in position of leadership, politicians need to get past themselves to get to actually look at the interests of the people. That is the only way we are going to see a National Assembly that comes out to say, you know what, let's put out a law that says National Assembly members, politicians from across boards are going to be paid like civil servants. And even if they're not being paid like civil servants, at least let's get to have a pay of rating payment system that says, okay, for those in the National Assembly, House of Rep, this is how much you would get a salary. For those at the Senate, this is how much you get. The presidency, drastically cut down on the huge amount of money these people take home. When we are able to do that, then the move of, putting an end to the high and the low without the middle is going to be completely removed. I know that prior to the first time I visited Lagos in 2019, after visiting Lagos, the conversations there, why people leave other shores of Nigeria and go to Lagos and are able to make it, is because the middle class is there, because of the businesses around, because of the environment that has been created. So what happens to us creating those scenarios? That we don't have to overcrowd Lagos, we don't have to overcrowd, Abuja, we don't have to see this migration from every other state towards the center. If we're able to get to that point, then we'll find out the different states of the Federation will have an enabling environment for businesses to thrive, an enabling environment for people to aspire and be able to achieve those aspirations. When that happens, then the middle class is going to gradually come back to take its course. And then the gap between the low and the high is not really going to be felt. Because when it trickles down to the middle class, then the low are going to have a lot more at their disposal. And that will significantly change the narrative in Nigeria.
It's a lot of concern, but just to break down the numbers so that we can all understand what we're dealing with. Now, when we say 1.37 billion naira for accommodation and other related allowances, that is in the period of their 4-year tenure as ministers under the Tinubu-led administration. And we see the fact that it is going to cost the federal government annually 343.25 million naira yearly, as cost for housing allowances for these ministers. And we also see the fact that these 45 ministers designate will get accommodation allowances, which is about 200% of their basic salary. They're also going to get domestic staff allowances, which is 75% of whatever their basic salary is. We also see utilities will receive 30% of basic salary. So we are saying there is basic salary, but yet we are going to, pay you all that fringe benefits to cater for other needs, and your salaries will still just be there breathing. We need to compare how that can be done also for civil servants in the country. And we also see, okay, utilities taking 30% of whatever their salaries are, and the furniture is going to be gulping 300% of their basic salary. Accommodation takes 200, their furnitures take 300%. Now an explanation is given. They are going to be given furniture allowances for just once in the 4-year term that they're coming into the office. Now let's not forget in a hurry that most of the people who are ministers in this dispensation have been ministers across different dispensations. Let's not forget that some of them have been sitting governors. It means that they don't have need for houses. They do not have need for, what do we call them now, furnitures, because there are other, allowances that they have gotten from different places that are still catering for these needs. We just had that conversation this morning. Serap is asking the federal government to stop these people from earning multiple pensions. When you earn multiple pensions, what do you do with this money? Yet we are still paying you. So we are saying there is a big cry. The cost of governance is a big snag in the wheel of this country.
It's a very big scenario. Now, there's a question we have to ask ourselves. The average Nigerian, before venturing into politics, do you change your furniture every 4 years? So if you as an individual do not change your furniture every 4 years, why is there a need to change it when you step into governance? Do we get to see people spend the amount of money that is being budgeted for utilities on their own? And I'm asking that question because I've had the opportunity of working with some politicians, and I know how much they spend in their respective houses. I mean, it's the same electricity that we are paying for as Nigerians. It's the same light. It's the same, utilities. You're buying from the same market. Probably you go to a higher market, but then, regardless, let's be sincere with ourselves as politicians. If we were not taking from the public's funds, will we be able to live the kind of vanity that we live? Will we, on our own, remove our hard-earned money to pay the kind of utilities that is being budgeted for? And then also, let's not even look at the corruption that goes on. Okay, do we even pay these domestic staff? How much is being budgeted?
75% of basic salary.
We don't. It doesn't happen. There is literally in this country, I stand corrected if there is a politician who can actually say, I am paying my domestic staff exactly how much is being budgeted. But I can almost join the part of Nigerians who say, and I've said it over time, that there is literally no politician who is paying his or her domestic staff the money that is being budgeted. Even within the office environment that people serving them, they're not paying. So It is still another way of further accruing money to these individuals. I do hope, for the interest of Nigerians, the renewed hope agenda of Ahmed Bola Tinubu will take into consideration coming out with a policy statement, with a law that will put an end to multiple pension, that will cut down the cost of government, and will rechannel that money to other areas that will better the loss of all Nigerians. If he's able to achieve just that one thing, then his legacy would have lasted. But I guess at this point, we're going to take a short pause in our conversations, and of course, we'll get to Mary Joseph, who's standing by to take us round with the latest happenings. When we do come back, Rise and Shine will continue. Stay with us.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTime's DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Government, Secretary General, delegates.
Voting for SpectrumTv to recover for the lapses taken into account.
A very good morning to you and welcome to your morning news briefing Spectrum live from Uyo. I am Mary Joseph. We begin this news brief with a report that as the ministers take the oath of office today, the priority focus of the federal government will be on the economy and security. The appointees would also be guided by the 8-point agenda of the president, as stated in his election manifesto. Reports say that the president might set targets and performance index for the cabinet ministers in order to create an immediate impact on the economy, security and other key areas. Away from that, the Central Bank of Nigeria intervention in the power, manufacturing and aviation sectors have reportedly risen to 5.6 trillion naira in 3 years. Reports say that the soft loans were advanced amid the continued and varied challenges facing the key sectors of the economy. The Apex Bank's loan to the 3 sectors were obtained from the CBN result and accounts between 2020 and 2022. Meanwhile, a Nigerian Okechukwu in Wuji, alongside 3 others, have said to be convicted and jailed for advance fee and money laundering scheme involving over $2 million. An attorney from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Gary Sean Anderson, announced that 38 years old Iwuji and the other 2 convicts fraudulently obtained the money by inducing GAM-based investors to pay bogus fees for a multi-million-dollar inheritance. The other convicts are Sally Roberto, 56, from Santa Rita, Monique Johnson, 49, from Dallas, Texas. Meanwhile, an update from the Niger, the Economic Community of West African States, have rejected Niger's junta's 3-year power transition plan. ECOWAS Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Abdel Fattah Musa, stated this during an interview. We quickly head straight to sports, where Nigeria's long jumping Ese Brume recorded a season best of 6.84 meters, but it was not enough to get her to the podium as she finished 4th in the women's world long jump of the ongoing World Athletics Championships in Budapest, Hungary. Serbia's Ivana Valletta won the event with a world lead jump of 7.14 meters, followed by Tara Davis Woodhull of the United States in second place with a mark of 6.91 meters, while Romania Alina Rotaru Kotman finished 3rd with a 6.88 meter mark. We'll have details of this and more in our news at 12. I am Mary Joseph. Let's head back to Rise and Shine, where we have Francis and Uyai on standby. Do have a wonderful morning.
As of government, Secretary General, delegates.
Voting for SpectrumTv to recover for the lapses taken into account. Voting for SpectrumTv to recover for the lapses taken into account.
Delegates.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Rise and Shine, and we're coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. Of course, this is Monday morning, and we've been talking Nigeria, looking at some of the issues that are on the front burners. Just to give you a quick recap of some of the things we've talked about, we looked at the fact that Serap is asking President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to stop multiple pension payments to ministers serving in his cabinet. We also see the fact that the Central Bank of Nigeria ruled out some reports of spending 74 billion naira on naira redesign and other related currency expenses for the year 2022. As part of our conversations this morning, also we see the fact that the Niger junta is asking the ECOWAS bloc to give them 3 years before the transition back into democratically elected governance, and also they are telling ECOWAS that war is unnecessary. These and more are some of the conversations we've had. We see the fact that there's an estimated 1.37 billion naira to be spent on accommodation and other allowances for ministers designate within 4 years of them manning those responsibilities in the country. Of course, several reactions by Nigerians and several questions and concerns raised. We also see the fact that the federal government, as part of oath taking for ministers designate today, promises to prioritize economy and security. These are some of the conversations we've had so far in Rise and Shine. To catch up on all that, you need to be following us across all social media platforms, all of which you can find at spectrum.tv.ng. At this point, we're going to be moving now to Daily Spotlight, where we bring you information from the front pages of our national dailies. Stay with us.
Well, on Daily Spotlight this morning, we are kickstarting a conversation with the Vanguard newspaper. And on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper this morning, the first kicker there says, Niger, ECOWAS reject junta's 3-year transition plan. The writer there says, junta warns against foreign intervention. Talks between ECOWAS, junta yield little result, officials. Of course, also talking about notes majority of soldiers at presidential complex will flee if ECOWAS attack. Pope calls for peace in coup hit Niger. That story is on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper. Still on the front page you find old age poverty to increase as pension coverage stagnates. Population rises. Only 16% of workers have pension protection. Less than 5% of entire citizens covered. Analysts call for more creativity in pension products design. That's an inside story, and of course you can find that on page 15. Still on the front page of Vanguard this morning, brutally frank, many governors wealthier than their states. That's from Adrian Clark. You can find the story on page 10. Page 12 has NDLEA bursts drug warehouse in Lagos, recovers 4.8 billion opiates. Page 59 has Tinubu appoints Momo as minister designate for Niger Delta. Still on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper this morning, energy crisis, cost of solar systems rises 120% to 550,000 as forex inflation worsens. That's on page number 9. And those are the major stories you'll find. Just to wrap it up, you see Spain beats England 1-0 to win Women's World Cup. That's on page 63. And those are the major stories you find on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper this morning.
Our next stop will be the Nigerian Tribune. Big story there says Tinubu reshuffles ministers' portfolios as government takes shape. Names Abubakar Momo as Minister of Niger Delta Development, moves Oyetola to Marine and Blue Economy. Tunji Ojo is now Minister of Interior. Saidu Alkali to take charge of Ministry of Transportation, swears in 45 ministers designate today. We also see here Russia's Luna 25 spacecraft crashes into moon. Page 5 is where you can find details of that story. We also see here Bawa's remand order has expired. Release him, Falana tells DSS. Page 5 is where you can also find that story. NDLEA intercepts fake $20 million cash on Lokoja Abuja highway. Recovers 4.8 billion naira worth of opioids in raids of Lagos drug warehouse. Page 25 is where you can find the details for that. More hunger looms as farmers harvest crops prematurely. Inflation bites. Page 6 is where you can find the details. Concern as currency in circulation drops by 7.51 billion, 133 days to old naira notes deadline. Page 7 is where we can find details of that. Why stolen funds from bank accounts are difficult to trace, says NEFF. Page 6, where you can find details. Isese Day, security agencies guard in Lorin River to prevent breakdown of law and order. Page 27 is where you can find details of that. ECOWAS rejects Niger junta's transition plans. Page 27. And that's all we have on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune.
And next up this morning is front page of this day newspaper. The kicker there says Atiku Kwankwaso Obi discussing merger may set up formidable party. That story is on page 8 of the This Day newspaper. Still on the front page, you have Tinubu brings back Niger Delta Development Ministry, names Mama Minister Designate. Reshuffles or the designation comes as a kicker there. And of course, moves Oyetola Tunji Ojo Alkali to new portfolios, renames Environment Ministry. That's on page 8 of This Day newspaper. Still on the front page, new leaders take charge of Africa's largest economy today. The writer there says 84 days after swearing in, Tinubu finally inaugurates 45-man cabinet. Federal government completes documentation exercise of ministers designate. That's on page 5 of the These Day newspaper. And of course, there's a picture story showing the few of the ministers there and their portfolios. Those are the major stories you find on the front page of This Day newspaper this morning.
Moving away from This Day newspaper, let's see what the Punch has to say this morning. The Punch newspaper says federal government prioritizes economy, security as ministers take oath today. Of course, front page of the conversation today is on the oath taking. We also see here Nigeria loses 249 billion naira in July as oil output drops. Page 25 is where you can find the details. CBN loan to manufacturers aviation firms rise to 5.6 trillion naira. Page 25 is where you can also find the details. Niger, ECOWAS rejects Junta's 3-year transition plan. Page 18 is where you can find details. We also see here President's 8-point agenda to guide appointees. Ministers complete documentation of SGF office. At SGS office, I beg your pardon. And we also see here Tinubu renames Environment Ministry, appoints Niger Delta Minister, reassigns Oyetola others. Farmers abandon farms, 23 Sokoto, Zamfara, Kebbi local governments under bandits. Details are on page 8. NDLEA recovers 4.8 billion naira drugs from wanted billionaires. Lagos warehouse, pages 4 and 5. Miscreants traders take over multi-million naira Lagos bus stops. Page 4 and 5 is where you can find details, and that's all we have on the front page of the Punch.
Well, last up this morning is the front page of the Nation newspaper. On the front page, the kicker there says Tinubu reassigns Oyetola to Marine, Momo to Niger Delta. The kicker there says Alkali, Tunji Ojo, Lakpobiri, Ekpo affected in minor shakeup. Abuja Gulf for ministers induction. You can find the story on page number 4 of the Nation newspaper. Still on the front page, ECOWAS reject Niger junta's transition plan. They must hand over now and return to the barracks. That's on page number 6. Labour backs tenure system for public sector directors. That story is on page number 2 of the Nation newspaper. Still on the front page, we have banks brew the change and talks to boost dollar liquidity. That story is still on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. Neymar conducts validation flight ahead ICAO audit. That is on page 6 of the Nation newspaper. And the last story this morning, why bank CEOs were barred from foreign trips. Those are the major stories you find on the front page of the Nation this morning.
Well, of course, big stories making the rounds right there on the front pages of our national dailies. Biggest of them being the fact that, ministers designates will be taking their oath of office today. And we do hope that this oath of office will be binding and as a guiding light for them as they take on these responsibilities to guide us, and help navigate the responsibilities of each of the sectors. But of course, as part of our focus conversations this morning, we're going to be looking at, the, so to say, last minute shake-up of the cabinet, that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has done and still brought in some more members. Of course, remember that in the first listing, there was no Minister for Niger Delta affairs put on the list, but now, a name has been put up. And these kinds of shakings, what does he hold for the ministers designate going forward?
Well, minister designate, I think the Ahmed Bola Tinubu's administration is going to be a funny one as far as Nigerians are concerned. We've seen so far a couple of shake-ups. It's literally like the president makes an announcement today, and the next minute there are changes. We saw it happening within the first bout of appointment within the security apparatus of the country. Now we are seeing it happening within the ministers designate who are going to be sworn in today. You ask, the focus of the present administration as they are being sworn in is going to be security and economy. These two things work hand in hand. Without security, the economy can grow. Even if you have security, without proper policies put in place for businesses to thrive, for foreign direct investment and export and import, all of those things work together for the economy to actually thrive. So Nigerians are expecting to see a lot in terms of commitment, in terms of policy direction, in terms of political will to actually make sure that security is being sorted out, the economy will be stabilized to a point that Nigeria can get to a point of having one of the most favorable, business environment for startups. Now, most people will tell you once you leave, the best place to start up your business, one of the best places to start up a business is Lagos State. What are the indices that makes that available in Lagos? Why can't we replicate that in the different states of the Federation? What are the hindrances? If those hindrances are removed and then we're able to set up these other, respective states, then the economy of the country is going to grow. But until we get to that point, once we still focus on making some states politicizing issues of economy, politicizing issues of expansion, politicizing issues of, making sure there is an enabling environment across the state, as opposed to, being focused on some designated states, then we will get to a point where Nigerians will have a better, heave a sigh of relief of better days coming. But I do hope that the ministers who are coming in, President Ahmed Bola Tinubu will look at the situation and the call by syrup and actually have these ministers stop taking money from their respective state. I like the word coming from the state man Edwin Clark. Most state governors are more wealthier than the states they are governing. So it's an irony that an individual is wealthier than a state. And that's something that must be corrected if we actually desire genuine change in Nigeria.
All right, that's the much we can take on our papers this morning. Looking at a plethora of issues. Of course, we're going to take a quick break now, and when we return, we'll be joined by our guest, who is Jido Jo, a columnist with Punch newspaper, MD CEO of Oja Consult. We'll take this break. When we return, there's more things we need to unearth. It's been about 83 days now into the governance of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He came in with an 8-point agenda. So far, so good. By the time we get to 100 days in office, are we going to be celebrating, or we're going to already start gnashing our teeth? There is a saying in Nigeria that the first 100 days will show what precedents they intend to live by. But is that really a thing? They can do right in the first 100 days and let go the guard just after that. But this and more is some of the conversations we're going to have just after this break. So do stay with us.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTime's DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is still Rise and Shine, the Monday morning edition, where we talk Nigeria and look into very serious conversations going on around the country, how we can move our country forward collectively by setting the agenda, having the right conversation, asking the right questions to the right people. Joining us this morning to do some of these things is Jide Ojo, who is a columnist with the Punch newspaper and MD CEO of Oja Consults, joining us all the way from Abuja this morning. Good morning, Jide Ojo. Very good to have you on the show this bright Monday morning.
My pleasure. Good morning.
Yes, I'd like to ask, how is Abuja today? You look resplendent in blue.
Abuja is fine. We're waiting patiently for our new ministers, and we hope we will experience good governance.
Exactly. So since you've already taken us there, let's start there this morning. Of course, they are going to be taking their oaths today, and the presidency has said the focus for this cabinet is going to be the economy and also security of the nation at this time. Also, last minute, just yesterday, we saw, the president shaking up the cabinet that he had already put together, reassigning some persons. What would you say might have informed that particular move? And like you were already inciting, what is the hope of the new cabinet?
Well, the new cabinet, the reshufflement of the ministers designate shows lack of proper homework on the part of the presidency. It shows, again, that if not for constitutional timeline for the formation of the cabinet, we will have maybe experienced a longer delay than we had under Buhari. Because this man promised us that he was going to hit the ground running. If you are supposed to hit the ground running, you should have had some idea of who and who you want to run your government with prior to your own inauguration on May 29. After all, this election was won and lost by 1st of March 2023. Tinubu was already announced president. Even though the inauguration did not come until May 29, as at the time you have been announced as the president ought to have moved into kind of idea talking to APC governors, who and who do you want me to have in my cabinet? I'm not saying he will have to single-handedly appoint everybody in that cabinet. He can't do it because he has to consult with the political party that brought him to power. He has to consult with all the other power brokers within the party structure and outside of the party and those who worked for him. But what I'm saying is that it shows that the president perhaps did not get into governance mode until May 29, and that is disastrous. For me, he has not hit the ground running in any way. Today is the 84th day after inauguration, and yet you are still swapping. Remember, he couldn't even submit a comprehensive list of his ministerial nominee
all at once.
When he did. He first sent in 28, and that even can lead to legal tussle, because the Constitution in Section 42A says that both the president and governors are to nominate their cabinet within 60 days of inauguration. So within 60 days, you brought 28 names. And after 60 days, about 70 days or thereabout, you brought additional 19 names. Now, what should have even been the procedure? We thought the delay was as a result of security clearance for those nominees, that the president didn't want to make mistakes. So he possibly, after receiving the nominations from the governors, from the party leaders, sent them to security agencies for screening. Maybe that was the delay. But as we have seen, the security clearance did not come until after the screening at the Senate. Otherwise, why would you have 3 people who could not scale the security screening? So all said and done, you now change after the first batch of nominee and the second batch of nominee, you still change 2 people, added and subtracted. Remember, Keyamu was not on the initial 2, and then they brought Keyamu. All these are signs that the president was not ready. Then, after they have their nominations were okayed by the Senate, more than 10 days, close to 2 weeks, you receive that list. Now you are inaugurating them today. And we are still thinking. I would not be surprised if during the inauguration today there are still some alterations. Oh, you can't go to Ministry of Sport, and you go to Ministry of Federal Government early enough. You have your the Chief of Staff early enough. Even with that, on the eve of the inauguration, some of these people may have spent quite a lot of resources managing economy. What is in and blue economy? Today we changing the title, but it's not sure of youth. Where is the space for? If you go the entire federal secretariat is opposite the 3 arms, and then the space is for federal workers. No new structures have been added, separate from Ministry of Culture and Art, separate from Ministry of Information. The boys.
But Jide Ojo, don't think the names of these persons that were called up as designates. One question was, I know you've already said it, first of all, making sure that the right men have the right portfolio so that they can get the jobs done.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Right now, even as I speak, Keyamu have in aviation.
Immigration, yes.
What expertise as somebody like Musawa, the lawyer from Katsina State, that you have put in charge of arts, entertainment, and whatever? What expertise? But assuming without considering that they can even learn on the job, is it the time to learn on the job? Is it the time? We are talking of economy in doldrums, economy that is comatose. Now, there is not enough office space for these people. There will be no budget for them. There will be no personnel. I don't know whether you're getting my drift.
Yes, I do. And this is also further bloating the cost of governance. This is also further bloating the cost of governance. Yeah.
Look, yesterday, the Punch newspaper published that federal government will be spending 1.37 billion on accommodation alone. Accommodation for these people in 4 years. 1.something billion. Now, it's not even the problem. The bigger problem is not even whether they are appropriate or they are round peg or a square peg. The point is, this is August ending. Today is 22nd or 21st of August.
Yes.
Now, there was no budgetary provision for Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy in 2023 budget. I hope you know that. There is no budget for Ministry of Innovation and all of this one that they put Bosun Tijani in charge. There is no provision for that. There is no provision for Ministry of Gas. You understand? What we have provision for is Ministry of Petroleum Resources. So how do you start? You unless you do environment, you cannot fund these newly created ministries. Even Minister of Finance have been balkanized. You have Minister of Finance different from Minister of Budget and National Planning now. How do you share the resources, the budget for Ministry of Budget, Finance and National Planning? So who gets what amount? And there is still some 4 months left in this year. So how do you fund these newly created ministries? That is another huge challenge. But beyond and above that, let me not forget to mention that Keyamu told us that Minister of State is illegal, is unconstitutional. Now we have 13 ministers of state. And when I read the Punch newspaper yesterday that talked about 1.37 billion being spent on accommodation for these people, you find out that what the substantive minister gets and what the Minister of State gets is not the same. Minister of State gets less than the substantive minister. So let me give you an instance of a looming war. Former governor of Jigawa State, Badaru, is now Minister of Defense. You now brought another former governor, Bello Matawale, as Minister of State for Defense. Both of them are former governors. So you will not say you are the junior, me I'm the senior. Is there supposed to be seniority among the governors? So you find out that there will be Cold War, because even some states that you only appoint their nominee, because all of them are representing their state, according to Section 147 sub 3. Somebody will now be saying, why is my state giving Minister of State and not substantive minister? And what is even the rationale for Asiwaju to pick 3 nominees from Ogun State and pick 1 from Ekiti?
That brings us to a very strong concern. That brings us to a very strong concern. When we break down this minister designate and when we put substantive ministers and, the ones that are referred to as lower ranks, we see that the Southeast is already crying out that they were not given enough numbers. with regards to this ministerial designate. We have some states taking as large as 8 persons, 10 persons and the like, but the Southeast, if my numbers remain correct, took about 5 or just 6 minister designates, and they are already raising eyebrows. Remember that you just incited us about some form of cold wars that may be going on amongst these ministers because of the sharing style that the president has taken. Do you think that this, because we're also looking at how we can cumulatively work towards moving nationhood to a place of success, how is this going to affect us?
Now, the point is, I wait patiently, and God helping me, I will follow through with all the inauguration of the ministers. I want to read the president's speech. There must be KPIs for each of the ministers, key performance indicators. There must be scope of work. There must be proper delineation of responsibilities. Otherwise, did you know what happened between Keyamo and Godswill Akpabio in Ministry of Niger Delta in 2019? Did you recall? Keyamo was initially posted Minister of Niger Delta, but when it was impossible for him to work with Godswill Akpabio, he has to go and lobby for him to be redeployed out of Minister of Niger Delta, and they now posted him to Ngige to go and be Minister of State for Labor and Employment. That is the nature and character of what the clashes that will likely happen, where you now bring 2 elephants to be in the same ministry. So I've given you the example of Ministry of Defense. Yeah. 2 former governors are now being, one is made a junior minister, one is made a senior minister. Yet they are representing their state. So Sanfara will say, oh, so you cheated us by giving us a minister of state. If at all there will be any minister of state, all the 36 states should have substantive ministers. Those ones that you now do on geopolitical basis, you can now give them minister of state. I don't know whether you are making sense. But Keyamo already has said that it's even illegal. But the major challenge we now have, which I'm emphasizing, is issue of who does what in each of those ministries. For instance, there are 2 ministers in Ministry of Education. There are 2 ministers in Ministry of Petroleum Resources. So if you have 2 ministers in education, is one going to be in charge of primary or secondary education, or one will be in charge of whatever? Maybe you split the the department and agencies, you split it for them. So this is your own areas of jurisdiction. This is your own area. But for people to say there's no junior minister, there are junior ministers, there are senior ministers.
Absolutely.
And there is that ego thing. For instance, all the 9 former governors, 8 of whom are cleared, all the former governors will feel entitled that, we were there, we did. So you are junior to me. I assign you what to do. You will go and represent me at this forum. You will go and do that. And it becomes a boy. But if he meets somebody who is not gentlemanly, that person will revolt and say, look, we are both ministers, even if I'm junior. But I see a junior minister like a deputy director or deputy. You understand? Unless you clearly delineate responsibility.
So this brings us to a major concern. This brings us to a major concern. Still talking around the former ministers, about 8 of former governors, I beg your pardon, who have now become, ministers in this particular cabinet. Serap has moved to ask the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to stop their pensions running for them as former state governors and now running into ministers, because all of the major concerns I can see that you have raised this morning is an alarm as to the cost of governance, and we are going to be having duplicated ministerial roles across different sectors. under this administration. Remember that I think we had this conversation with you, and you were even postulating that we should have considered cutting down on the number of ministers we have. Instead, now we have even seen it gone up and agencies have been increased. But the matter of pensions, Sajide, we are having some of these people earn pensions as former governors of their state, and some of them have been former sitting, ministers in the former administration and are coming down again. Is there a way to regulate how much we are spending on the heads of these persons?
Quite unfortunately and very dishearteningly, that's why I am not very happy with Tinubu. Tinubu came under the pretext of renewed hope. This is not hope. This is not what Nigerians hoped for. Because even starting with Mr. President himself, he's a former governor of Lagos State. Lagos is one of those states that have life pension for their governors. And I know from what we know of Tinubu, he's a billionaire. Does he need that life pension that he's still collecting? Or I presume he's still collecting. Babatunde Raji Fashola was a former governor. He was a minister for 8 years. I don't know if there is anything in the public domain that says he was not collecting a pension even as he was minister. The same thing with Akwa Ibom. Akwa Ibom has a life pension for governors.
Yeah.
Now, Godswill Akpabio is a former governor. He was a former minister of Niger Delta. Mm-hmm. He was a former senator, now a president of the Senate, number 3 position. Are we sure that he's not collecting pension in Akwa Ibom, even as he is now a GSM, former governor, former minister, and now senator? So these are the issues that needs accountability and transparency. Mm-hmm. Can we, the only person that impressed me was former governor of Ogun State, Benga Daniel, Otumba Benga Daniel. He made public a letter that he wrote to now I'm a senator of the Federal Republic. Stop my pension for now. And he even quoted the amount he is receiving as pension as the former governor. You understand? That's the only person that I know to stop his pension now that he's president. We know that since he left office in 2007, he has not held any political office. Even the so-called leader of APC was just an honorary. He was not a NEC member of APC. He was not an NW member of APC. But now that he's elected president, can we see a letter that has been written to Lagos State government to say, stop my pension because I am now a president of Nigeria? Then definitely we will have had the moral rights to call on those who are former governors, who are now ministers designate, to also ask for their pension to be stopped. But even beyond and above that, there should have been an amendment that passed that law for life pension. I recall that Kwara State government has similarly requested that the law be abrogated. So it is within the purview of the State House of Assembly of those 27 or thereabouts where there is life pension for governors to say, even if they want to retain this life pension thing, to say public office. That's the appropriate thing to do.
That absolutely be a right
moment move. You don't even need to write. Do you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there is an alteration of, if you are holding any other political office, for the period that you are in that public office, your pension will be stopped. Because it amounts, so how can somebody work for 8 years and receive life pension? And somebody is working 35 years and their pension and gratuities are not being paid. Is that all their youthful years serving the state or the federal government, they are not getting their pension they are not getting their gratuity. You that was governor for 8 years, you didn't buy a pin in those 8 years. You are being the first state in Nigeria will take care of their governor if
Okay.
he is sick.
Judy,
His
let's
family
look
is
at
sick.
something
And
that I
governor
want us to land
governor of,
on.
wait, let me land on this.
Okay.
Let me land over 2 months. Now, is it not at the expense of Ondo State? You understand? So, but he's very comfortable financially. He's a senior advocate. He's a senior lawyer. He's a 2-time governor. But the state is taking care of his medical bill. We should know what is equity, justice, and fairness. We all know this. And that's why if we want to stop corruption, political leaders need to set the right examples. They have to be exemplary. State is a billionaire. In 2019, engineer Seyi Makinde of Oyo State declared that is worth about 40 billion naira in asset. That was governor of Oyo State. Does it make sense? Meanwhile, you are struggling to pay minimum wage. This minimum wage, the governor said he doesn't have. They will find money to pay big fat allowances for them. So that's what I'm saying. If we don't want revolution, we need to allow the political elite across the political divide needs to have sense for us to be living in opulence. Look at it. The National Assembly is marked 70 billion for refurbishment marked out of the economic relief package. Meanwhile, all federal secretariats where there is epileptic light and water.
So we need to land this conversation this morning. Just for this morning, we need to land this conversation. And this is in just about a minute or so. I'd like you to answer this question. Today is the 84th day of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the President of the Federal Republic. Do you think that 100 days in office of this administration will be a landmark? Looking at all the policies that have been reeled out from May 29 till date, will the 100th day mark be a landmark?
Unfortunately, that's why I said the ministers are coming in late. Because if you want them to help you achieve anything in 100 days, you cannot bring them barely 16 days to that landmark date of 100 days. But Ashwadi did not promise anything in terms of knowledge. It's just the tradition that people track and say in the first 100 days, these are what I've been able to achieve. But we know that even the popularity rating of the president is doing good. You could see a lot of skits being made, that is lambasting and lampooning the president. But not a lot could still be done in those 15, 16 days after inauguration. Don't forget that they are going to go for retreat after the inauguration. So we are without to work. Those ministers, would they have the wherewithal? When we say they must be well resourced, it means in terms of funding, in terms of human capital, they must have staff, they must have office space, they must have all the things that they will need to really hit the ground running. But we wish them well. The most ministries, departments, and agencies. And let me shock you. We have
we're absolutely out of time at this point.
Ministries, departments, and agencies.
We're absolutely out of this point, out of time at this point. Would really love to, delve into some of these conversations again. We would definitely have to bring you back. But a big thank you to you, Jide Ojo, for coming on the show this morning. Great wealth of knowledge and exposition on the issues that are bothering us. Like you said, it is our responsibility as the media and civil, strong national voice in this country. Thank you for coming on Rise and Shine this morning.
My pleasure. Have a great week, my sister.
And you too, sir. This is absolutely all we can take, but great questions, great inputs given there by Jide Ojo. Catch up on everything we've talked about in Rise and Shine across all our social media platforms. Until tomorrow, I remain Uyai, and here can I head you back now to Sports Central.